Some parents outraged over random mandatory testing at New York City public schools, but the question remains, will Catholic schools do this too? I'm Emily Druby, and that's ahead.
Homelessness across New York City has exploded since the pandemic. I'm Jessica Easthope with what Catholics are doing to hand out food and dignity in the process.
Also ahead, heading back to school and trying to shed weight gained during quarantine. We've got expert tips from St. John's University's campus dietitian. Plus, the final installment of our special series, Roaming the Eternal City. We'll show you the heavenly angels on the bridge to Castel Sant'Angelo. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. We begin with New York City schools' mandatory COVID testing. Mayor Bill de Blasio saying again today that the plan to keep schools open safely depends on it. But does this impact schools in the diocese? Currents News' Emily Druby reports.
Per the agreement, we'll start the systematic testing in October.
Mayor Bill de Blasio doubling down today on the city's plan to have monthly mandatory coronavirus testing in New York City public schools. It was originally announced Tuesday.
Every single school will have testing. It will be done every single month. It will be rigorous.
Starting October 1st, public schools will be required to randomly test 10 to 20% of their in-house students and staff. The mayor says the free test will be the self-swab ones. Parental consent is required. Students whose parents don't give consent will be moved to remote learning. Any staff members refusing to take part will be placed on unpaid leave. The mayor was optimistic about parents' reactions.
From what we've seen so far, we think we're going to get a very strong, positive response.
But many were not happy, blasting the idea on social media. New York City Councilman Joe Borelli of Staten Island was one of them, writing, quote, "I am angry that a bunch of guys, two of whom none of us trust, sat in a room and decided on my kid getting a medical test without my presence." Further calling it an astounding stretch of authority, he says he's had dozens of families call his office to complain. At first, the city and union said testing would happen in schools. Now they're saying it'll happen at third-party healthcare facilities. Catholic schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn say they will not be doing this.
We will be sending out and encouraging our teachers completely voluntarily. If they would like to be tested, we will be providing them available testing sites for their convenience, but we will not be doing random testing of anyone in our school communities.
Instead of mandatory random testing, they'll follow the Core 4 guidelines. Stay home if you are sick, social distance 6 feet, cover your face, and practice healthy hand hygiene. On the Upper East Side, Emily Druby, Currents News.
The jobs report is out today, and fewer people filed for unemployment. Last week, 881,000 Americans made initial claims for benefits. It's just the second time that number has been below 1 million since the pandemic shut the economy down. A new measurement method could have been a factor in the drop, along with a slowly improving labor market. Despite the decrease, unemployment is still above 10% as COVID continues to wreak havoc on the economy. The numbers putting added pressure on lawmakers on Capitol Hill, who are on recess until after Labor Day, to pass another stimulus package. Whitney Wild has the latest.
Americans hit hard by COVID-19's economic impact have gone from disappointed to desperate.
When it hit, I lost my job. So it took me like a month to get another job. This is my check, but I ain't making it with $300.
Senators will return to Capitol Hill after Labor Day, likely taking another look at stimulus legislation meant to ease the pain. As regular citizens navigate the devastation, Republicans and Democrats remain oceans apart.
All I can tell you at the moment is we're at a stalemate, so I don't know whether we're going to get another package here in the next few weeks or not.
Democrats suggested a multi-trillion-dollar relief bill, but Republicans won't sign off on the cost and propose smaller legislation to fund schools, small businesses, and scaled-back federal unemployment benefits. Democrats accuse Republicans of ignoring the totality of the crisis. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wrote to his colleagues, Republicans may call their proposal skinny, but it would be more appropriate to call it emaciated.
Secretary Mnuchin, I hope you will return to the negotiating table prepared to find common cause on legislation that meets the pressing needs of Americans.
Adding pressure, the budget deadline at the end of the month. If they can't agree on a deal to fund the government, lawmakers will face yet another shutdown. Whitney Wild, Currents News.
President Trump is threatening to defund New York City and other cities he deems lawless. He said he'll do anything in his power to prevent the cities of New York, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Portland from taking federal dollars while they let, quote, anarchists harm people, burn buildings, and ruin lives and businesses. Governor Cuomo fired back, calling it an illegal stunt, and said people here are so livid with the president that he might not be able to safely walk the streets.
He can't come back to New York. He can't. He's going to walk down the street in New York. Forget bodyguards. He better have an army.
Mayor Bill de Blasio also blasted the president for making this threat and then made a threat of his own.
If you persist in trying to deny the funding that's keeping New York City going in the middle of this crisis, we will see you in court. And once again, we will beat you in court.
De Blasio said the president of the United States can't interfere with federal funding for cities and states just because he feels like it. The number of homeless people in New York City is at record levels. One Catholic organization is doing all it can to try to keep up and serve those less fortunate with dignity and compassion. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has more from Lower Manhattan.
Homelessness in New York City is at the highest level since the Great Depression. A reality hard to ignore.
I've been coming here since when this pandemic first hit, and the only thing you see on the streets in Manhattan is homeless people.
Compounded with the coronavirus crisis, the issue is sparking concerns about the future of New York City and these individuals if they don't get the help they need.
We moved everything outside around March 16th, and our numbers just exploded quickly.
James Murphy volunteers at the Catholic Worker on the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
What's up, Abraham?
He's seen the influx firsthand.
Coffee.
He says before the pandemic, they were serving 120 people a day. Now they serve 250 people a day. More than hot meals, James says the goal is to dish out some dignity.
Get to know people. That personal interaction is also needed beyond standing behind a stainless steel table and handing out food.
Though meaningful, the Catholic Workers' efforts only help a small percentage. According to the most recent counts, nearly 133,000 men, women, and children were sleeping in homeless shelters across the city. That number doesn't account for those who sleep on the street. In Midtown Manhattan, commuters at Penn Station say the situation is heartbreaking.
You see it a lot more, for sure. There's a lot more homelessness. It's sad to see what's going on with our homeless people here in New York. I think that they've been forgotten.
All right, thank you.
But the people coming to the Catholic Worker every day won't let the volunteers forget. Lives depend on the calling they have to help the poor.
It's our responsibility as Catholics to help those in need. It's a foundation of our faith. There's no doubt about that.
In Manhattan, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
7 police officers have been suspended in Rochester, New York, after a black man suffocated after being detained. This afternoon, video of the incident in March was released. It's too graphic to show in its entirety. Police were called after reports that Daniel Prude was experiencing a mental health episode. The incident prompting protests in the city after being handcuffed by the officers. Prude, who was in the street naked, yelled, "In Jesus' name I pray, let me go." The video then shows officers putting a bag over Prude's head and holding him on the ground. He apparently stopped breathing and was pronounced brain dead at the hospital. His family wants the officers to be fired and charged with murder. Joe Biden traveled to Kenosha, Wisconsin today, a city that has been protesting the police-involved shooting of 29-year-old Jacob Blake. Stepping off the plane, the Democratic presidential nominee immediately met with Blake's family at an airport building. Blake's father, sisters, and brother attended the private meeting in person. Blake himself, as well as his mother and lawyers, joined by phone. Biden spoke about their conversation at a town hall at a local church.
Had an opportunity to spend some time with Jacob on the phone. He's out of ICU. We spoke for about 15 minutes. He talked about how nothing was going to defeat him, how whether he walked again or not, he was not going to give up.
Members of the community then addressed Biden with issues such as systemic racism and prison reform. Facebook is making a move to target misinformation and political ads before the November election. This comes after the social media giant was criticized for not fact-checking some ads. The company said today it will restrict new political advertisements in the week leading up to the election and remove posts that convey misinformation about COVID-19 and voting. A college student's comments on Black Lives Matter is the basis of a lawsuit on religious liberty. The political science major at Florida State University was kicked off of the student senate when comments he made in a forum for Catholic students were made public. The student claimed that positions held by Black Lives Matter and the ACLU did not align with teachings of the Catholic Church. There's disappointment and anger at one school in North Carolina after Bible verses were cut out of a day planners donated to students. A Baptist church in Alexander County provided hundreds of the planners to a local middle school. But two passages from Philippians and Jeremiah that were on the back of the planner were cut out before being distributed. The school district said it is prohibited by law from indoctrinating students with religious teachings. There's a lot more news headed your way. How a baby monitor is now helping keep workers on the front lines in the battle against the coronavirus safe. Also,
did you know angels actually recount Jesus' passion and death in Rome? I'll show you how, coming up.
And right after the break, healthy eating tips on getting rid of what's being called the Pandemic 15.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
The Quarantine 15, you may have heard of it, you may have even experienced it, the extra weight put on during lockdown because gyms were closed and you stayed indoors, or too much homemade banana bread in my case. So here now to help us get back into shape is Adam Ross, St. John's University's campus dietitian. And first off, Adam, before we get into your tips to shed the extra weight, tell us how important is it to be in shape during a pandemic when it comes to your immune system?
It's vital. Yeah, it's extremely important. I mean, obviously, proper, nutrition and exercise is something that is going to promote a healthy immune system. If we can get the right kind of nutrients we want to get into our body with good, healthy nutrition, obviously we're going to promote a healthier immune system, and one that can obviously fight back from something, like we're experiencing right now. And same with activity, right? So obviously, the better we're in cardiovascular, the healthier our heart is. And just the more we're staying moving in general, again, we're just promoting our body just working more optimally and being in better condition overall. So yeah, the diet and the exercise is definitely very important to your immune system.
All right, so gyms are finally open in the city with a limited capacity, and the colder weather is on its way. So what should we do to get back into shape? I know you have some tips for us.
Yeah, so stay moving. That's super important, all right? I think that's one thing that we don't think enough about is just general movement and how much it affects our body and our ability to keep a healthy weight. So just basic movement from things like taking a walk or doing some gardening, little chores around the house, things like that. We can actually burn a lot of calories. So throughout the day, we'll usually burn more calories than we will through our workout. So the workout is obviously very important, to strengthening our muscles and things like that and strengthening our heart. But that non-exercise activity, little things to do to move more, is actually very vital to your caloric burn throughout the day.
Interesting. And you also say utilize virtual programs. Maybe you're too scared to go to the gym or you just can't get in. What kind of programs?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of, obviously, everybody's kind of had to pivot, right? So the fitness industry especially has really made a pivot to virtual, and there's some really great, there's a lot of apps. You can do something paid apps, paid challenges, things right now. There's a lot of free things going on. So there's tons of content being put out, whether it's social media, YouTube, find an app, things like that. But there's something literally to fit anybody, and also what you have available, right? So if body weight is all you have, if you don't have any weights or machines or anything like that at home, that's okay. You can find a body weight program.
All right, you also suggest staying on an eating schedule?
Yes, so I am a big schedule guy. I think that's a key. All right, so also too, like, your body puts out hunger hormones and things like that, and it likes to have a schedule. So the more scheduled you can be, your body will start to adapt to that, right? So if I'm eating breakfast at 9 a.m., I'm eating lunch at 1 p.m., and I'm eating dinner at 5 p.m. Around those times, you're going to generally notice that you start to get hungry, right? That may not generally be that you're starving at that point, but you do have, hunger hormones and things in your body that regulate that. So, if we're just sporadically eating all over the place throughout the day, it just kind of starts to throw off our rhythm, and it starts to throw off our body. And we don't know when we're hungry, when we're not, and we just get into this habit of just kind of grazing and consistently eating throughout the day.
All right, Adam Ross, St. John's University's campus dietitian. Thanks for your input today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
A new study is detailing just how high the risks are for pregnant women after getting COVID-19. The research published in a leading medical journal shows soon-to-be moms are more likely to be admitted to the ICU after testing positive. They are also at a higher risk of delivering preterm. Some numbers that were low, the overall rates of preterm births, stillbirths, and neonatal death. A rehab center for kids recovering from COVID has opened in New Orleans, the first and only one in Louisiana for children. Doctors say thousands of kids there are suffering even after they've tested negative, seeing symptoms such as depression, anxiety, muscle pains, and loss of smell. A rare but serious condition has also risen among kids who have had COVID, a syndrome that causes inflammation of the organs. The cause of that condition is still unclear. A common tool for new parents is now being used in the fight against COVID, baby monitors. The device can monitor breathing. It's something medical centers across the country are using to communicate with patients while reducing contact. Bill Hudson has more from Minneapolis.
Do you want to flip it yourself?
In her Minneapolis home, Fallon Bonset had the typical new parent concerns.
I remember crying, like looking at her and thinking, what if she stops breathing? And at night we would stress, and I would, do the look over and check on her.
But now she's got peace of mind because staring down into Olive's crib is a wireless camera that never blinks, but it does so much more. It monitors a baby's breathing.
If something were to happen, I would get an alert immediately.
Every time they get in, we sell out.
The Miku monitor is the product of co-founder Colt Seaman, who discovered a few months ago that this camera could help care centers in the fight to control COVID.
Since our device was contactless, real-time breathing, high accuracies, and we could see the breathing patterns, we started getting a lot of hospitals reaching out.
Now, medical centers from New York to California are finding Miku a cost-effective way to communicate with patients and monitor their breathing, helping further reduce COVID contact for staff.
Elderly care facilities and any other facility was looking for any kind of equipment that can help them.
A product designed for parents.
And my mom even was like, I wish they had that when you were a baby.
Brings another tool in the fight against COVID.
That was Bill Hudson reporting. There are other crib monitors on the market, but none of them are wireless. Bishops across the nation are being asked to help their brothers and sisters suffering from natural disasters. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops sending out a request that special collections be taken up around the country for victims of Hurricane Laura and the wildfires in California. The money will become part of the Bishop's Emergency Disaster Relief Fund and support the efforts of Catholic charities and Catholic relief services. Still to come on Currents News, we'll travel to Rome to bring you the final installment of our series, Roaming the Eternal City. We'll take you to a place steeped in the history of Christianity, the heavenly angels on the bridge to Castel Sant'Angelo. That's next. But before we go, do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. All summer long, we've been taking you to Rome virtually because of the coronavirus travel ban. Today, Vatican reporter Melissa BUTZ wraps up our series, Roaming the Eternal City, with a fascinating look at the often overlooked heavenly angels along the bridge to Castel Sant'Angelo.
Known for its appearance in Angels and Demons, Rome's Castel Sant'Angelo, or Castle of the Holy Angels, is a popular tourist spot. However, many overlook the bridge in front, a significant bridge that takes us back to a critical moment in Christianity. The Holy Angel Bridge was originally built in 134 AD as a passageway to pagan Roman Emperor Hadrian's mausoleum. But in 590, after the fall of the Roman Empire, St. Michael the Archangel miraculously appeared to Pope Gregory the Great above the castle, giving it a new religious meaning. Art historian Elizabeth Lev says the castle became even more noteworthy as Christian pilgrims flocked to Rome in the 1300s. But it took another 300 years before the iconic angels were erected.
Clement IX Rospigliosi starts thinking, you know what? We need to jazz up this bridge. And it's 1675 is going to be a Jubilee year, so why not make it even more exciting for the pilgrims? And they do it by adding these angels.
The statues were designed by 70-year-old Bernini, who as a devout Catholic was thinking about the end of his life. The angels represent the artist's thoughts on the way to salvation, shown through Jesus' passion.
You start at the beginning of the road with St. Peter and St. Paul. St. Peter is telling you this is the road where the humble find forgiveness. St. Paul is telling you this is the road where the proud find their comeuppance. And you see these instruments.
They're displayed in each angel's hands, ranging from the whips to Jesus' garments to the cross and the sponge with vinegar that quenched Jesus' thirst.
These angels are really designed as you go to St. Peter's, where you will receive your plenary indulgence. This is a way of reminding you of what that salvation, what that forgiveness cost you.
Elizabeth explains that today tourists in the Eternal City often miss the importance of the bridge. Now the pathway is crowded with vendors selling items on the ground, causing pilgrims to look down instead of up at the angelic portrayal of the way of the cross. Just as this pathway is a symbolic crossing over into salvation, popes also used it to save themselves, escaping from the Holy See in a secret tunnel that led all the way to Castel Sant'Angelo. In fact, in 1527, Pope Clement VII was the very first one to use this escape route while escaping the sack of Rome. In Rome, Melissa BUTZ, Currents News.
And tune in tomorrow to Currents News, where we will have a special tour of the Eternal City by Melissa. She revisits all the wonderful sights and sounds of Rome that we've been highlighting for you throughout the summer. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.